as the cars get on their way. G63s and a G500 here also in the dark green. You can hear a bit of the noise from the car adjacent to mine. But the G63, or the new G-Class in general, very much maintains that unique appearance, the iconic G-Class styling. It's a rugged off-roader, it has a boxy silhouette, but of course also all-wheel drive, differential locks. It's based on the ladder-type frame, it has a low-range gearbox. To the casual observer, you might not necessarily instantly see what has changed, and we'll go over that in more detail later on. Just updated slightly on the exterior, but significantly underneath the skin. So let's jump in, get this drive started for the day before we take a better look around very, very shortly. I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I've always felt that the G-Classes of different generations are particularly cool cars. They are so distinctive, they're unique. The rugged looks clearly built for going off-road, and then you have the absurd creations that they've built on the platforms, like the G63 6x6, the massive six-wheeler, the G650 Landaulet with the V12 and the Maybach Landaulet interior with the folding roof, the G500 4x4 squared, basically really cool cars. However, I'm not going to lie, when I drove the previous gen G63, the normal four-wheeled AMG variant, I was a little bit disappointed. Now I know these cars are built for their ruggedness and for being driven off-road, but driving it on normal tarmac, I wasn't expecting it to be a great car. But even then, it was still a little bit uninspiring. Now I can tell you already, this is vastly improved, and that is because basically, although the looks might be quite similar to how the previous gen was, it is all new. There is a new engine, new suspension, new frame, new gearbox setup, new driving modes. You now have, as we're familiar with from other Mercedes models, the ability to change your different driving mode and how the car is set up. So from slippery to comfort to Sport Plus, and even individual mode if you want to completely customize the car. Then if you engage one of the three diff lock buttons, you have G mode, where you then have access to some off-roading driving modes as well. So a whole lot of configurability of the car. Now I'm driving at the moment in regular comfort. We're going to go through the different modes as we push the car on a little bit later on, but you also have the AMG exhaust with a button to make things a little bit louder. And I can hear that already, because one of the big things is now having the new 4-litre bi-turbo V8, an engine that I particularly love from many different cars, including my AMG GTR, but obviously it's featuring across the range. And also in here, by the way, this is basically the interior out of an S-Class. It is an S-Class AMG performance steering wheel. We have the dual 12.3-inch digital displays as part of the widescreen cockpit. We have some lovely trims and stitching embroideries and the like on these seats, some carbon fibre trim, some custom Edition 1 trim inside the car. Basically, it's a really nice place to be, and we're on a road that you would not normally consider this to be at home in. And yes, there's some roll, obviously. It's 2.5 tons, it's 2,495 kilos, but it's a massive step on from the previous gen, and this is in comfort mode, where obviously it's going to wallow around a little bit more. If we use the toggle and go down into Sport, or even Sport Plus, where obviously the gearbox is dropping down, or I can blip it manually down another gear, and there's a button here to hold that. This is where, goodness me, it gets a move on as well. 0 to 62 miles an hour, 100 kilometers an hour. It's just 4.5 seconds in a G-Wagon. That is quite frankly absurd, and actually already I can feel, obviously it's a little bit firmer over any kind of bumps, but it's a G-Wagon, so it's not exactly uncomfortable, and it just gets a move on. It's so much better. The front end feel is not lost all over the place as it was before. Anyway, I'm talking a little bit too much. Let's pull over, have a proper look around, run over some of the facts, figures and numbers, and then we'll get out on the road to drive it a little bit more. Let's take a more detailed look around the new car then, talk about some of the familiarities, some of the differences versus the previous generation, and the specifics to this car, the G63, and in particular, the Edition 1, so the model that's only available in the first year of production. Now I'm going to jump out in a second, but just quickly before we do, the interior in here, the dashboard, the driver's cockpit, so to speak, is fantastic. These large dual digital displays that we've seen in other models like the E-Class, the S-Class, the AMG performance steering wheel, some traditional features like the triple chromed buttons here for the diff locks, the traditional grab handle over there for the passenger, and just a very nice finish to the interior, but we'll come back to this in a second. What I'd like to do right now is just open the door, because right here are the side exit exhaust pipes. Listen to this. Not bad at all, hey? So let's switch the car off for the moment and jump out. We'll come back in and take a proper look around everything in there, press all the buttons shortly. But it is so iconic as a G-Class. You look at this car, there is no mistaking at all what you're looking at. Many changes, edges are slightly more curved, the windows are less aggressive, the general shapes of the car ever so slightly updated, but still very, very true to the original car. One of the biggest differences though, of course, is the new engine. So in both the G500 and the G63, you have a 4-litre bi-turbo V8. In here, you have 585 horsepower and 850 Newton meters of torque. We'll have a look under the hood in a moment, but you look around the car, the Edition 1 is finished with all of the red accents that you can see, the contrasting mirrors for example, but the AMG version gives you the wider arches, it gives you the new look to the front end, the more aggressive bumper for more cooling that comes through. You also get the new Panamericana style grille that was introduced on the AMG GTR that's making its way across the line, with the central Mercedes-Benz star in the middle, being the radar cruise control for that side of things, the technology features in the car. You get the side exit exhaust, AMG specific wheels, the side step as well, and around the back, traditionally, of course, the rear door with the wheel mounted. If we just open this up, it's the feel of all of these, the clunky feel that you get from the very mechanical locking system. Even in there, we've got some nice diamond quilting and stitching at the very back. But I love, as you open and close, that solid thud that you had on previous gens that's still been maintained. Of course, they've had to make the doors completely watertight around the base, all part of the car's increased wading depth, up from 60mm to 70mm. Some more off-roading characteristics and numbers about this car. Let's start with the ground clearance. So it's based on a reworked ladder type frame. There's no subframe, which means everything that would normally be underneath is hidden away. That means in this case, ground clearance is now increased by 6mm to 241mm in total. Around the front, the angle of approach, so from the tyre contact point up through the front bumper, is now increased 1 degree to 31. There's also a 1 degree increase at the angle of departure at the rear, up to 30 degrees. It won't surprise you that the G63 is a permanent all-wheel drive setup, but rather than the 50-50 distribution in the previous car, it is now 40% to the front, 60% to the rear, and that's to make it more sporty and more agile. And talking of more agile, let's come and have a look at the engine. Any excuse to open the doors, hey, and feel that mechanical clunk again. So it's somewhere down here. Yep, there we go. Again, in traditional style, there is a high, proud front bonnet, but lurking under here, if I can find the catch, is the power plant from a Falterback. It's an engine we're becoming very familiar with, the 4-litre bi-turbo V8. It has 2 twin-scroll turbochargers, and in this case, 585 horsepower, 850 Newton meters of torque. 0 to 100 kilometers an hour, as I said, is just 4.5 seconds. So again, the agility helping under acceleration when you consider the weight of this car. Top speed is limited by default to 220 kilometers an hour, but with the driver's package can be increased to 240. But of course, that's sitting up front underneath a very nice carbon fiber cover, hiding away that engine. Not too much to see. Let's close that back down, give it a nice thud. There we go. It's all, you know, the indicators sticking out over the top, the clunks that you feel. It is that old school element in a new car. So you also have new multi-beam LED headlights. These are very, very trick. They can blank out certain areas of the distance that are in front of you so as not to dazzle or blind oncoming traffic or vehicles. Again, just walking around past the front grille, everything's slightly more rounded than before. Everything was a bit more edgy and squared off slightly on the previous model. With the Edition 1 package, you get a very highly equipped car, but also features like the contrast door mirrors with the red accent stripe. You get the pinstripe around the outside of the wheels, 22-inch wheel options on this car. This colour is called Designo Platinum Magno, Magno being their name for satin paintwork. You get the AMG-style stripes that you see alongside the car. And as I mentioned, the Edition 1 is only available for the first full year of production of the car at all. So let's come now and take in the interior a little bit more. And the first thing I'm going to do is fire it up actually to get some air conditioning running for me, and also turn on the ventilated seat. That will be a very welcome feature right now because it is very, very warm. Things like the headlight styling comes through towards the air conditioning vents that you have in here. The rumbles into life. But it's all, I mean, like I said, traditional mixed with S-Class. So you have the seat controls on the doors. Oh, I don't know if I necessarily closed it properly. Needs a proper thud. that you have, you know, in other Mercedes models. You have the Burmester sound system, the brilliant audio, heated seats, cooled seats, the assistance and safety systems, for example, when you're drifting across lanes, the screens that we've had a look at already, the steering wheel, the AMG performance wheel, where you can control the displays from these touchpads and go through different modes and displays, and you can see it's even got a race timer and a G-force sensor. Which mode have I gone to? You can see there we go. That kind of gives you some of the intent. You can customize the display and have a different view should you prefer. We'll click some of those buttons later. The navigation is up full screen here. The Edition 1 also gives you the upgraded interior, so the nicer leather interior package, this custom carbon fiber that has red, as you can just see, weaved into it, the nice stitching around the car. Basically, you feel like you're in a luxury car when you're sat inside here. Everything is super, super nice. We've got a sunroof up top as well, and there's a lot more space. So there's 38mm more front seat legroom, and 150mm more legroom for the rear as well. We'll have a look back there later on, but similar finish to the materials in the back. Anyway, there's a nice road here. Let's go and drive it some more and experience the different modes on the road side of things with the G63. The first thing I'm going to say is that fairly obviously, if you have a windscreen that is raked this vertically, you get a whole lot of wind noise when you're driving along at speed. That's not exactly surprising, but then you have this high up seating position. It just feels, it's not actually that big a car, you have to remember. The G-Class, it's an SUV, but it's not a huge SUV, so it's actually quite a nice car to drive in town environments, which is why you see so many in London, Dubai, a lot around Frankfurt, to be completely honest. However, this is a very twisty road, so let us go into, well, let's go into sport mode first rather than comfort, just to get a feel of the different damper settings and the like. So we're currently in the first, or the second I should say, of the 3 different suspension modes, from soft to sport up to sport plus. The car has a new suspension setup, so it has independent double wishbones at the front, and then it has a fixed rigid axle at the back with 5-link suspension, which basically means that it's a bit sportier, has a slightly more comfortable ride, and has just been improved in basically every single possible way. The car itself is 55% stiffer as well, so you're not going to feel it bending and flexing so much when you drive it in a dynamic way. Yeah, there's a nice little bit of noise coming in the cabin. I quite like the sport mode setup and configuration actually. If you go one further into Sport Plus, that's where it will drop the gear down a few more gears, and because you've got this 9-speed AMG speed shift, if you put your foot down really hard, it will drop 3 gears in one, so you won't have to wait for it to jump down through each one, so to speak. It can instinctively just do the honours and get on with it. Now, all of these different settings you can configure manually depending how you want them, in terms of the manual gearbox, the noise from the exhaust. So I think the exhaust only actually gets properly noisy if you're up in Sport Plus. Yes, that's where we were, of course. But now I'm going to go manual with the paddles. It would revert to automatic if I don't press that button. So we've now got the stiffest suspension, so to speak. And it's amazing me that this is a G63, because honestly, the previous one just didn't have this kind of composure, and I suppose you do have to remember it's still big and kind of floating around. It's not like a supercar or a proper sports car, but it's a different league to what it was in the previous generation. The shifts are quick, there's a nice sound from them, the deep grumble that you expect out of this car, the feeling of power, which is basically what it does. You drive it and you feel almost invincible. You feel like you're, you know, strong and can just push everybody out the way. Now that you should do that when you're driving, but that's the sensation it gives you, that basically nothing is going to be able to mess with you when you're driving in a G-Wagon. And then you combine it with the luxury and the interior comforts, you know, the audio, the Burmester sound system, all your Bluetooth and everything else you could possibly want, and you've got a package that's basically quite a comfortable car to actually drive on. I mean, like, picture the scenario. You've got a car that you don't want to put miles on, you stick it in a trailer and drive it across Europe in one of these. How cool would that be? That's kind of like my dream in the background. Maybe one day. Let's see if that becomes an option. Maybe for tugging around, not the GTR, that's my main mileage car, but maybe the Ford GT or something in future. Anyways, just driving, you know, obviously speed bumps, non-issue. Suspension is reasonably soft, even in the firmest mode when you do that. And then you put your foot down as you come out of town, and my goodness, it just flies. It absolutely flies. It's a crazy feeling in a vehicle like this to get moving like that. This is a cool location actually to bring it. This is a rough road right now, so obviously in the roughest setting is not the best, but you could actually, even in Sport Plus, put the suspension softer. You can do everything how you want it. We'll experience some of the diff lock buttons and how they set up, I think, when we're in the off-roading environment. I'm not the biggest expert when it comes to those, but in terms of general comfort and functionality inside the car, It's everything we love about a Mercedes. The materials and finish of an S-Class, the technology that we're familiar with from the E-Class, from anything else, insert your choice, with a massively, dramatically improved G-Wagon. To be completely honest, I really enjoy it so far. Honestly, a car of this shape and size should not be able to drive like this. It is nothing like the previous generation at all. And the amount of power is just incredible. I knew it would be much more than I've experienced in the previous one, but the steering is so much better, everything is better, the sound is cool, but the rate at which it gets moving, I'm having to take this in, and this is a car that you can then use, as we're going to use it later on, for properly exploring the off-road and going over some ridiculous land shapes and bits of sculpture in the ground that you just shouldn't be able to do. It's an amazing package. I just can't believe how they've transformed it. It's moved on completely into a car that just combines so many different things so brilliantly. This is the kind of road typically you'd want to be driving in a small, nimble, maybe even a hot hatch kind of car. But I'm not unhappy about being here in the G63. So okay, let's try and be a little bit critical for a moment. What do I not like? Perhaps there is still some body roll. You know, if you're throwing it down a mountain road like this one, the gear shifts could be a touch more responsive maybe, but then it's trying to put so much torque through to be used as a car in that kind of environment, you know, when you're trying to get traction on the wheels in sand or in wet mud or anything like that. It's a hard one to fault outside of the price, to be honest. The UK start price is 140,000. You will do nearly £20,000 extra for an Edition 1 package. The Euros price is about 160,000, and then add on 20,000 euros for the Edition 1 there. So it's not a cheap car. But if this is what you're after, I don't think there's much that could do it better. I mean, even here, chucking it into a really tight corner, and then out of the straight you go. Maybe it's a little bit wafty there when you put down that much power. That's kind of to be expected, 850 Newton meters. But it turns into these really tight hairpins quite nicely. You can keep your hands in one position even there. What a road. And what a surprise. What an absolute surprise package. Honestly, if you asked me, I think maybe at the beginning, what I was expecting based on the previous car, it was not this. It was not this at all. I feel like this could give some sports cars a run for their money on a road like this. And it's quite easy to be precise and accurate with as well, which is obviously quite important as a car gets larger, but helped by the visibility and the high position. I've got a massive smile on my face. I'm loving this today. You know that you're having a whale of a time when you start to get the tyres squealing on a road. It's a very warm day and this is super twisty, and it's a big heavy car of course, but I'm having a whale of a time today. So much fun. And one other thing I quite like about the car is the visibility. There is so much glass around you. The A-pillars are tiny, but towards the back as well, you can see everything, and the car is actually quite small. The footprint is not all that big, and even if it was, because of how angular it is and how edgy the sides are, you know exactly where everything is. Even the front, because you have the indicators sticking up at the corners, you can see exactly where the front of the car is, exactly where the side of the car is, because it goes straight down, which just makes it a really enjoyable car to drive because it's so easy to position. Then you add in the soundtrack and the power. This is cool. This is really cool. By this point, you've probably gathered that I am really quite keen on this car. However, there is one significant niggle that is really bugging me, and that is the wind noise. Whether it's the wind on the front windscreen or the way the airflow comes around the car across the door mirrors, I don't know exactly, but it is a very present sound, and it's a particularly windy day today, I'll give it that, but you can't escape the sound of the wind coming past, which just gets a little bit on my nerves. Now, forgetting that for a moment, it is basically perfect. I mean, the G-Class is to the G-Class like, say, a Phantom is to luxurious chauffeur vehicles. It is the only one that does what it does in this way. Anything like it, you can't see a competitor even ever existing because it's such a defined market. But what they have done with this car is just phenomenal. Hats off to Mercedes and AMG. The new G63 is very special, and this is just on the roads. Let's go find the off-road course and see what that's about.